I went to Mad and I said, I'm so depressed. I had this sketch and I showed it to Nick Meglin, who was associate editor back then. And he said, you know what? This is very funny. Rewrite it as a movie and we'll run it in Mad, not as a satire on a picture. We'll run it as a generic kind of thing. And it went over big. So he said, do the generic submarine movie, do the generic. Anyway, I did like 4 of them. And Nick said, well, you know what? Now you should move in with the big guys and start writing the major satires.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Design Rescue Show one more time. I am your host, David Block, and today I'm extremely excited to welcome our guest, the Mad Magazine's Maddest writer and the Giz Wiz himself, Dick DeBartolo. Welcome to the show, Dick.
Great. This is really fun to be here, which shows you how my career has deteriorated.
Oh, oh my gosh. Well, okay. So basically, this is going to be a behind the scenes tour, as far back as we can go, and talk about how you began, how you made it to where you are today. And my first question, I'd actually like to find out what you're doing these days. What do you have that's keeping you busy currently?
Okay, so I do a show called The Giz Wiz, and it's a show about gadgets. We try to find kind of offbeat gadgets, project stars on your ceiling and waves on your wall. And I started with a guy named Leo Laporte, who has a network called Twit, This Week in Tech. And for some reason, it just keeps running. Tomorrow, Thursday, we record episode 2005.
Oh my goodness.
So it's probably one of the oldest podcasts going. We've been doing it for a little more than 18 years.
Wow. That's fantastic.
It continues. It sort of gets harder to find 4 new gadgets every week. So I've been through thousands of gadgets.
Yeah.
And then I do a very silly show called Giz Fizz. And it came from talking to the chat room between takes of the Giz Wiz Show.
Right.
And I started asking match game questions I had written and captioning photos. And that turned into an hour show of its own. So those are the 2 things I do. I do 2 one-hour shows a week for the web.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So, and we'll get into the match game, and absolutely we'll talk about the Giz Wiz. I'd like to begin, first of all, going way back. Talk about your schooling. Where did you go to school, and did your education play into your career path?
No, actually, it turned out great. I wanted to be a writer all my life. And my father owned a machine shop. And one time he said, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a writer. He goes, no, a writer is not an occupation. An occupation is a man who uses tools. So we had this fight endlessly when I was a kid. And it ended up that we decided I would go to a Central Commercial High School, the only high school in the city that taught business. So I would learn accounting and shorthand, and I would run the business.
Right.
What was great about that is that everybody there wanted to be in business. I wanted to be in show business. No one wanted to produce the high school plays, run audio video, run the school newspaper. I did all those things. And it was great because I got to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And also my favorite story is back at home, I was zero sports person, but we had a finished basement and I built a desk like my desk here. There was a place called Lafayette Radio. I bought an amplifier. I bought a microphone. I got stenciling for the wall, RDB Productions. And I ran a speaker into the house next door because my mother went there every day at 4 for coffee. And every day at 4, I would broadcast from my basement to the house next door. and and so now I have a real studio, and I broadcast to thousands of people. But I always think, what a wonderful thing this is, that my childhood dream lives on in this studio.
Right. That's wonderful. That's awesome. So now then, in your career, from what I've researched in the very beginning, I mean, I don't know what came before Mad magazine, but if you could talk about some of the experiences that you had that brought you to want to go work at Mad. I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, I was showbiz crazy. When I was a kid, I produced the annual show that the church put on, and it was a thing in space, and I knew about dry ice and fogs, and I bought lights, and so I was just crazy about that. Then I started reading Mad magazine, and after a year or so, I thought, wow, I want to read this, but I want to write this. So there was a book called The Writer's Digest, and it said, if you submit to a magazine, send a self-addressed stamped envelope, because otherwise your work will just be thrown away if it's rejected. So I sent Mad a takeoff on ads, and about 6 weeks later, my own envelope came back. I got very depressed, and I opened the envelope, and it was just stuffed with cardboard. And the cardboard, on one of the panels, it said, "Ha ha, thought this was your script being rejected. We bought your script. Here's $100 check."
Hey, that's awesome.
Pretty big for a high school student.
Right.
Please call us. We want to talk to you about writing more stuff.
Wow.
And I ended up doing 50 years of writing for Mad.
It's outstanding. If you're enjoying this video, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you. Can you recall one of, or let me say this. Can you talk about one of the first major projects that you did with Matt?
I used to do what was called filler pieces. They were the people who wrote the movies and the TV satires, which are the big long things. Right. And the filler pieces were 1 to 3 page in between things. And I wrote ads and fake ads and surveys and things. And then I had written a sketch for 2 guys who were just out of the Air Force, and they wanted to do stand up, and I wrote the sketch, and one of them turned out to be John Biner, whose name you probably know. And his partner thought what I had written was dreadful. John Biner said, "I thought it was good, but I'm not going to perform it alone. I'll pay you my half of what we decided on." He's not going to pay you. Anyway, I went to Mad, and I said, "I'm so depressed." I had this sketch, and I showed it to Nick Meglin, who was associate editor back then. And he said, "You know what? This is very funny. Rewrite it as a movie, and we'll run it in Mad, not as a satire on a picture. We'll run it as a generic kind of thing." And it went over big. So he said, "Do the generic submarine movie, do the generic." Anyway, I did like 4 of them. And Nick said, "Well, you know what? Now you should move in with the big guys and start writing the major satires." So I did Jord 2 and the Towering Sterno and the Poop Side Down Adventure and Voyage to See What's on the Bottom. A lot of TV shows.
Yes.
Yeah. And at the same time, I started working for Goodson Todman. So it was wonderful because I often got to meet people in the satires I'd written about. And I would always bring a copy of Mad. And I remember June, Lost in Space, June Lockhart.
Yes.
June Lockhart was on the show, and I said, June, I did Loused Up in Space for Mad. She said, oh, get me a copy. I'll read them on my lunch hour. So after lunch, she said, do you have someone on the show? And I said, no. I said, why? She said, that plot is very close to something we're going to record next month.
Oh my goodness.
I said, well, I'm glad I got the feel of the show. So it was fun to do satirical things on people and also get to meet them in real life.
That's amazing. Were you also involved with the Star Black by any chance?
Oh, yes. Star Black. Star Black. I have my letter from George Lucas on my wall here,
oh, that's awesome.
It was Star Wars. I wrote a lot of the Star Wars movies, and George sent a letter to Gaines and said there should be an Academy Award for Dick DeBartolo, writer, and Mort Trucker, artist, for Star Wars. And 3 days later, Bill got a letter from Lucas's attorneys. This is copyright infringement. And that was 8 pages in the magazine. And we demand the original art, and we demand the profits from those 8 pages.
Wow.
And Bill showed me that letter, and I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I made a copy of your letter and I scribbled across their letter, gee, George liked it. And of course, we never heard from the attorneys again.
Right. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I'd like to know, actually, from your time from your time at Mad, what was one of the craziest or outlandish projects that you were a part of?
Boy, well, the Mad trips were unbelievable. Gaines would republish things you had written in a Mad special, and you didn't get paid for that because Mad owned and still owns. Mad owns everything they ever bought. And so he started, it started with Bill. Bill was a little crazy in his own way. William M. Gaines, the founder and publisher of Mad. He handled all the checks. He handled all the subscriptions, and he noticed that we had one subscriber in, I think it was either Suriname or Puerto Rico. Anyway, Bill said, you know what, let's just take the whole staff to his house and ask him to if he would renew. And that was the very first trip, which I wasn't on. And Bill said, so 8 of us went, and we knocked on the guy's door and said, we're the staff of Mad. You're our only subscribers. Would you consider subscribing again? And then I usually add, and his neighbor subscribed. So for about $8,000, Mad doubled their circulation in Puerto Rico or wherever it was.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of craziness up there.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately died with Gaines. When he passed on, things got very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, let me just double check real quick. Yeah. One last question on Mad. I'm curious. Yep. What was it like working with artists like Sergio Aragonés, Don Martin, people like that?
See, the weird thing about Mad. None of those people were in the office. Oh, Mad was between 7 and 12 people, depending on how much work there was. So Don Martin lived in Florida, Mort Trucker out on the island, Sergio, LA. And so you would write a script like a movie script with, in this panel, so-and-so is happening, and then the dialogue. The great thing is the Mad artists would add tons of stuff of their own, which is called chicken fat, just adding stuff that didn't belong there. It was wonderful. I mean, I met Don Martin like twice in my life on the Mad trips. That was the other thing about the Mad trips. It was the only time all the artists and all the writers were together at the same time. And on the trip, Don and I said, Don, why don't we knock out a book or something while we're here? And I would say, how about this? It starts with bunch of cowboys up on a cliff. He goes, 2 cowboys on a cliff. All right. And the Indians are attacking. Don would say, and an Indian is attacking. I go, why are you changing all this? Because I have to draw it. So that's the only time we didn't get to work together.
Right.
Yeah. Every once in a while I would walk up and run into Al Jaffe because Jaffe lived close to Mad and he would drop his work off in person. But mostly everything came in through FedEx.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So now moving on just a bit, this is simultaneous. I'm sure you're working at Mad you've been there for decades, right? You were there for decades. So in the 70s and 80s, you also went to go and work on the Match Game. One of my favorite game shows. I still listen to the theme song every now and then, just for the heck of it. I'd like to know if you could talk about your time on the Match Game. How did you land that particular position?
I had a friend who worked for Goodson Todman who knew I worked for Mad. And he said, we're doing a kind of silly show. And he said, we'll come over and I'll explain the game to you, which he did. And unless you saw, there's only 1 week of the first go round of Match Game, which had nothing to do with comedy. It was name a red flower, name someone who appears on money, name something you can do with an egg.
Okay.
And it was a year contract, and 10 months in, Mark Goodson called me and he said, listen, NBC is not picking up the show. He said, you have 2 months of shows, but if you want to look for work, you can start now.
Wow.
And then over the weekend, I'm thinking, God, I like Match Game. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? There should be something mad I could do with Match Game. And that's when I thought, I'm going to start writing. And I wrote like 10 questions. And the very first Match Game question ever was, Mary liked to pour gravy on John's blank. And yes, Goodson laughed, you laughed, and Goodson laughs and he goes, well, what would they say? I'd say, they'll say mashed potatoes, meatloaf, but you'll have the last first.
Right.
And he said, well, it's canceled. Do what you want. They can't cancel it twice. 6 weeks in, I get the call to go into his office. He goes, NBC's in for another year. He said, the rating is going up. So keep writing those questions.
That's awesome.
And I ended up, I didn't get a share of the show, but I got I think 18 years at Goodson Todman. And at Mad, I only went in 2 half days a week. I did everything else at home. And it was wonderful because Mad was on 52nd and Madison, and Goodson Todman was on 52nd and Park. So I had one block. I could run the meetings all day long between the 2 places.
Nice. That's awesome. What was the process? Was it just whatever came to mind, whatever hit you, whatever was funny?
Well, the thing we knew was the New York version, which was 5 years. I wrote it. It was just me. When it went to LA, it changed. In New York, there was just 2 team captains.
Got it.
And then Goodson said, listen, Match Game's going to stop for about 2 years. There's something new out called syndication. And he said, he was very good to me. He said, pick a show you want to be on and tell the producer that Mark said you're on it. So I bounced around between, I did To Tell the Truth for a while, What's My Line for a while. But when it went to Hollywood, I think they wanted to be more like Hollywood Squares. So it went to 6 celebrities and just 2 contestants. Oh. And the questions got a little more edgy. The most fun was there was a nighttime version on ABC, and they said the questions can be a little grittier.
Yeah.
Well, the way to get really funny stuff on is to write some out and out filth and put it in so that the senses go, are they kidding?
Oh, there it is. Mrs. Brown's motto is, be prepared. So now that she's pregnant, she always carries a blank with her. The audience is mildly titillated.
Once more. Yeah.
Yes, here we go. Once more for the upper tier. Mrs. Brown's motto is, be prepared. So now that she's pregnant, she always carries a blank with her. Now, Peggy, Mrs. Brown's motto is be prepared. So now that she's pregnant, she always carries a blank with her. What do you put in that blank?
A doctor with her?
She always carries a doctor with her. That's not a bad answer. Don't owe at her like that. Doctor. Okay, Joe, she says doctor. What do you say?
He's in medical school, but he's only a Boy Scout.
I see. Carries a Boy Scout with her. Be prepared is their motto. All right, Brett?
I think mine is the most sensible. She carries a delivery bag.
With a little black bag with all of the tools in it and all that? All right, that's her answer.
Moving right along.
Yes.
I said a chastity belt.
It's a little late for a chastity belt.
Locking the
Right.
barn door after the horse is lost.
Linda?
I think mine's the most sensible. I said a crib.
A crib. Carries a crib with her. All right. Doctor is the answer we're looking for, Richard.
The crib's all right, but with a new baby, you need a diaper.
Diaper is a very good one. Okay, Betty?
Do you know why a doctor is a doctor for midgets? Because he has very little patience. No, that's not right. I have a suitcase.
What have you got? A suitcase. A suitcase.
Yeah.
Well,
No questions there. All right. Now, Peggy,
Those are
you didn't do well
six
with that
of the
at all,
worst
but,
answers
let's see
I've
how you do
ever
in the second round.
But the one I sent in thinking they're going to say they're kidding, they approved and got on the air, and it's my favorite question ever. Unlucky Louie was so unlucky. How
unlucky was he?
When he went on a diet, he lost 2 inches, but he didn't lose it from his waist. He lost it from his blank. Yeah, yes, everybody guffawed, and then they said his height, his nose,
Right.
his hair.
Yeah.
So it did get on, but it was funny.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Fantastic. So now, of course, moving on just a little bit further, actually into the turn of the century, around 2006, you started working on the Giz Wiz Show. I'm sorry, with Leo Laporte on the Tech Guy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Tech Guy Show.
I met Leo at a press event, and he said, "Oh, actually, I met Leo earlier. I was doing gadgets on a local show called Saturday Morning Live, and then I got a call from Regis that I want to do Regis. I did Regis monthly for like 5 years, and then I went over to Good Morning America for like 4 years."
Wow.
Doing the Giz Wiz things. On one of the Good Morning America segments, they said, "Dick, we're going to send you out to San Francisco to the Gourmet Show. So see if you can find some cooking gadgets to show on GMA, Good Morning America." And I emailed the people at it was Tech TV back then,
Right.
and I said, "I'm coming to the studio. Can I come by and see you tape a show?" And Martin Sargent, who was on the show, called me up and he said, "You can certainly come to the studio, but if I tell the producer that you're here, would you want to be on the show?" He said, I don't know if they want you on the show, but before I ask them, would you want to be on? And I said, "Oh, I'd love to be on with Leo." So a producer called a couple of days later and said, "Yeah, bring gadgets from the Gourmet Show and you'll be on with Leo." And Leo and I, we just hit it off.
Right.
And they just said, "You want to be on monthly?" And then they said, Tech TV is opening a satellite studio in New York. You want to be on every week? You just have to go to 23rd Street. And then after a while, Leo started his podcast.
Yeah.
And only about 9 months in, he said, listen, I do a weekly show and a monthly show. I want to do a daily show. Could you do a daily show? I said, yeah, a gadget every day. And I said, Leo, I have so much old crap. How about we do like a warehouse gadget every Friday, something from the past?
Right.
And that's the way it started until the editor said, God, why do we edit every day? Can't you do 5 gadgets in a show?
Right.
So, and that just became the Giz Wiz.
That's outstanding. And so, you know, you reviewed tons of different kinds of gadgets, like from every corner of the house that you would, you know, every room you would find some kind of a gadget that's has to do with life in every aspect. But I'd love to know, like, for instance, there's one that was an LED toilet light.
An LED, which one?
Toilet light.
Oh, yeah.
The LED toilet light. So I'd love to know what was one of some of the craziest things that you found that you've reviewed.
Boy, the water fountain for your faucet. It was actually, I thought it was a clever idea. It did well for about a year. It's a rubber, little rubber. I don't know what you would call it. It looks like a rubber funnel. And it snaps onto your kitchen faucet and water runs through the bottom of the funnel. But if you want to make it into a fountain, you squeeze the bottom of the funnel and there's a little hole, rounded hole, and suddenly your kitchen sink is like a water fountain. And it was like $4 or something. And I thought, that is so incredibly clever.
Right.
Then the bizarre gadget company, it was at the hardware show, used to be great. So one year I go there and they have the garbage can that as you approach it, it opens up because there's a sensor in it that sees you coming and it opens the lid. I think awesome. I did that everywhere, GMA and Leo. And the following year, the guy said, you like our opening garbage can? Wait till you see the automatic paper towel dispenser. I go, okay. So I go over, I said, how does it work? He says, well, bring up the menu. What? The menu for a paper towel? Yeah. Do you want 1 sheet, 1.5 sheets, or 2 sheets? All right, 2 sheets. All right, now push go. You push go. And I said to him, isn't the paper towel roll going the wrong way? And it goes, well, it has to go back so the electric eye can find the seam. So it finds the seam and it puts out 2 sheets of paper. And I go to tear it. And the guy goes, no, you can't tear it down like that. The machine will fall over. Oh, you have to gently lift it from the bottom and tear it up. And I'm thinking, what? Are you kidding me?
Right.
$70.
Oh my goodness.
Like 30 or 40 years ago. And I'm thinking, what?
That's awesome. That's amazing. So how did you select gadgets to review? Did people send them to you, or is it just wherever you found them you just kind of want
I
to
went to a lot of shows, CES and the hardware show, the gourmet show, toy fair. But now I'm in the Giz Wiz for like 35 years. I get at least 50 to 100 emails a day, people plugging stuff. And basically what I find it's way easier just to buy stuff on Amazon than to deal with PR people. Right. Like if I'm doing, Lenovo calls up and they have a laptop that does something amazing, they'll lend me the laptop for 90 days.
Right.
I'm not going to go buy it. But if it's under $50, it's way easy to buy it because no one calls up and says, well, when are you going to use that gadget we sent you? So I just buy stuff, lots of stuff.
Right. Excellent. So I have one last question for you. We've made it all the way to the end of the show.
Okay.
And thank you
I hope
so
I didn't
much.
Talk too much for you.
No. Yeah. I wish we could go on and on, but I absolutely appreciate your time. And I'm curious about now, since of course the show is for high school kids, for people that are coming out and going into the industry, going into the creative industry, whether they're being, writers, designers. I'm just curious if you have any words of advice for students that are getting into a career in a creative industry.
Well, first of all, you're the luckiest people ever, because you can become famous with nobody. I mean, if you maybe, I don't know what a website costs. It used to be $10 or $100, whatever it is. You can create a website. You can make movies. You can do all of these things. And if you can start to build a following, somebody might come looking for you to give you work. The other thing is, in another way, it makes it difficult especially if you want to. I hear so many people want to be a podcaster. When Leo started podcasting, there were like 9 people doing it, and now there are like 1,000 people a day podcasting. My thing all through life has been not for the big bucks, but to do something I like doing. And that if I like doing it, less of money is okay, because I could also have a second job. I think if you can afford it, is to just look for something you want to do. And the other thing is to realize that with your current talent and the technology, you can really do a lot of stuff. And I need to have an agent and a manager. You don't need any of that stuff. You don't even need well, you need David here. Outside of him, you don't need anybody else. I'm going to say it's a bit rough, I think. However, if you create something that really catches people's eye and post it, people will beat a path to your door. It used to be build a mousetrap, and people will beat a path to your door. Now it's come up with a neat logo, come up with a neat motto, and you could make something out of that. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Once again, I appreciate your time. It's been great getting to know you, and I appreciate I value every moment that you're on my show. Thank you so much, Dave.
No, and what you're doing is amazing. That little tour of your studio and the workstation for everybody.
Right.
You're giving them a lot of free. You're doing what sort of what Bill Gaines used to do, is a lot of freedom in which Bill used to say, someone said, Bill, you're a genius. And Bill said, I'm not a genius. If I did anything, I created an atmosphere in which artists and writers can thrive. And it sounds very much like exactly what you're doing for your students. So they should thank you, and I thank you.